Hello and welcome to another episode of Showmakers. Today we have Grant Sanderson from the fantastic math-based channel 3Blue1Brown. Welcome, Grant.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. As we normally do, can you just give us a kind of background of how you got into YouTube, when you did, what you were doing before YouTube, and everything leading up into your life up until YouTube?
All right. I feel like with a lot of these things, there's kind of a narrative that you paint in hindsight, and it's hard to tell how much of it is actually what was in your mind at the time. But it was not the case that I kind of set out thinking, I will start this YouTube channel and try to grow it and it'll be great. I honestly just wanted a coding project because I had done a bit of computer science through college, but had felt a little bit rusty for a bit and wanted just a personal project. And something that I thought would be neat would be to create a little personal graphics library to create illustrations. And I love math. I just love explaining it, just even in casual context to friends. So I thought, if I have something where I could whip up a visual illustration of the thing that I want to explain kind of quickly, that would be great. That would be awesome. And I don't know about you, but whenever you do some kind of personal project like this, it's very easy to just let it sit on the sidelines and not have a notion of it actually being done. So for the sake of having a little bit of a goalpost, I was like, all right, what it'll mean if I have completed my project here is if I make it I use this tool to make one video. And so that was the goal I set out, and it took me several months to sort of put together the library and put together the video I had in mind. And ultimately I did. And I, put a little YouTube channel around it and uploaded it. And it was actually a lot of fun. And once the tool was there, I was like, well, it's kind of fun to maybe use the same style. It's a little bit distinctive, maybe make another video with that. And things started to snowball there, not in terms of huge audience growth. I think each of you are of the creator types where your first creations are ones that really helped start this momentum of growing a big audience. But for me, it was just, there was a couple hundred people who watched that first video, maybe a couple thousand that watched the second video. And it was just neat that people were interested in math at all, right? I think if you ask yourself how much of society is interested in recreationally watching videos about math, you don't exactly have the highest anticipation for, what that audience size would be. But around this time, actually, Khan Academy was doing something called a talent search, where they were sort of recruiting people to come be creators for them. Because for a long time, it was just Sal Khan, creating these videos, pumping them out. The rest of the company was working on the broader site and marketing around all of that. And they started to expand a little bit for other people creating either videos or exercises or even some written works. And so I saw this thing, some friends pointed me to it hey, you should submit some videos to this. And I did. And I was fortunate enough to be one of their selected quote unquote winners, whatever that means, where they kind of flew 10 of us out to the Khan Academy offices and the YouTube offices to talk with them, meet with them, do various things. So there were 9 other creators sort of ranging from smaller to larger that were part of that. And in my case, and in the case of one other, it ended up translating to just working for them, because I was kind of at a point in my life, I finished college not too long before then, where the idea of just creating math videos for a career, especially through an entity like Khan Academy, that was just awesome. I mean, huge reach, very, very unusual, very 21st century, right? You tell someone, what do you do for a living? And, you're like, I make math videos. Usually that raises an eyebrow of some kind, because it's that shouldn't be something you can do. And I'm sure I'll skip some bits here, but we'll get into whatever relevant points there are later. But I worked for Khan Academy for about a year, and in that time I just kept adding more videos to 3Blue1Brown pretty slowly, because it all of this was mixed with kind of the software engineering of growing out the library as well. But the audience started to grow a bit, and people seemed pretty into the style as something that I don't know, maybe they weren't finding on other math or science related channels. And about a year ago, maybe a little over a year ago, I ended up leaving Khan Academy to just focus just on 3Blue1Brown and grow that out more and kind of pour the attention directly into it. and very grateful just for like the support that people have shown and like how enthusiastic people actually seem to be about math, which is still awesome and kind of surprising to me, because even though I love it very much, I still view it as this very niche thing, especially when you want to go a little bit more into depth and not just talk around what these topics are, but really get into the meat of when a mathematician says they love this, like what are they actually referring to? And that, I don't know. Yeah. Long story short, that's a bit of the trajectory here, but we can maybe get into more specifics for what piques your mind.
Yeah. Well, there's like 3 or 4 things that I would have stopped you, but you're on a roll there. I remember we were on a phone call. Like the first time I actually talked to you was about this time. It wasn't this time last year. Maybe a bit more than a year.
Yeah, this is crazy. Like you and I first got to know each other in the context of like mutually asking Henry Reich for advice on things. So you caught me right when I was in this, oh God, Henry, I don't know what to do. Should I stay at Khan Academy? Should I leave? Like, I don't know if that's viable. So your first introduction to me was in this like core pivotal moment of deciding what to do.
That was a really cool experience too, because I think that was the first time I ever got to talk to one of the big educational creators, and it was like me and you on the call with Henry, just trying to like figure out what the hell this YouTube thing was, and it was a pivotal time for me too. I think that was like it was the first time I was getting offers for sponsorship. I didn't really know what to do with it, and Henry was helping me like make some decisions.
Can we just have a little side note as like Henry is fantastic? As
I think we've had that side note quite a few times.
Oh, good. I'm glad he's getting the due attention, because it's like I don't know. On the one hand, he obviously puts out great videos, but it seems as if he views part of his role in the internet community as like fostering this growth of smaller creators turned larger ones that he likes in some ways, and it's almost like this paternalistic instinct that it's very sweet in its own way, you know.
Yeah, he puts the ladder back down for people. Like and like even when I was working on him for our collaboration, I think I talked about this on the podcast before, but the dude is just so switched on. Like I was trying to keep up. I was like, I can't. He's so smart.
Oh yeah, it's funny because I think because that was the one that you guys were doing on like battery technology. Around that same time, like. He and I were doing something collaborative. So I think in more than one ways, you and I have had like very parallel experiences with like a relationship with and respect for Henry Reich, like through the years.
Your collaboration with them was actually fantastic too. That was a really interesting subject with the polarization filters, but how it was like, I can't even describe it. It went over my head for the most part.
That was fun. It's funny. And I actually have a couple like things I might have done differently in hindsight, but on the whole, that was just a fantastic, I certainly wouldn't have done a topic like that on my own, because while I know some physics, it's not like something I view myself as like an authority on by any means. So that was a nice bit of a stretch to like research a little more deeply in there and work within the context of a different style. Anyway, I cut you off. This is a rabbit hole inside a rabbit hole. You had some broader point you were getting to.
Well, no, like this is a very conversational podcast. Anyways, like we go off on our tangents. That is fine.
For sure.
The other thing, and I briefly talked about this with you at VidCon and stuff, but the animation software that you use, you developed yourself.
Yeah, and like I said, it's not like I was doing because there's just not good enough animation software, and damn it, I have to write it myself. It like not at all, right? I think After Effects is going to be dramatically more powerful. I just wanted a coding project when I started off, and I think the reason that I sort of kept up with writing, like doing the animations programmatically, one, it kind of ensures a uniqueness of style where, by virtue of the fact that it's like a tool that no one else uses, it's very hard to actually be original in any way. I think it's underappreciated just how hard that is. And I don't know if I am necessarily, but the more things you can do to push you in that direction, I think the better. But mostly in the context of math, like math is married so very well with computer science, such that the kind of animations that look like they would take a really, really long time if you were doing them in After Effects. Like, we're going to look at the complex plane and we're going to transform it such that each point z moves to z squared or something that you're trying to illustrate and talk through, where in a traditional tool would like take forever. because it is like mathematical in nature, those are the ones that actually end up being kind of quick to whip up in a more programmatic context. So it has this other nice forcing function where the things that take the smallest amount of time but still look good better reflect the underlying patterns of math. Whereas I think with other tools, the things that take a small amount of time but still look good may or may not actually help with the specific narrative or the specific thing that you're trying to teach. And I kind of like that alignment.
Mm-hmm. But like with that software, do you have like a user interface for it, or is it more just kind of you code the kind of mathematical principle that you want to, like you put in the like equation inputs and stuff, and it kind of spits out an animation? How does that work?
Yeah, it's no user interface. I think if I wanted to make it a little bit like more of a product that I put out there, I might throw some user interface on top of it. But literally the way that it works is I'll have for each video like a Python file filled with a whole bunch of classes that I'll call like scenes. And a video might end up being like, I don't know, 2,000 to 3,000 lines of code that each particular scene like just outputs an MP4 file that is that animation. And at the end, with like this whole stack of MP4 files that are the things corresponding to the things that I want to say, I just throw that into some simple video editor and time it with the narration. So it is very text and script based. And I keep contemplating if it would make sense to invest a little effort to putting a user interface on top of it. But certainly while it's just me using it, I don't think that there's a huge return on that investment.
No, well, like, it definitely potentially could be, but I think it's the return on investment of keeping it for yourself for the channel is a lot more. Like, you don't want to be giving that tool to other people to compete with you almost.
Oh, on the contrary, actually, I'm more so other people. It's open sourced, and like people, especially if they're computer science interested, like ask about it and sometimes try to play around with it. And 9 times out of 10, they're like, "Boy, this is really hard to get started with because it's like not documented at all."
Right.
But some people have actually made videos with it. There's one that on like how to make Minecraft spherical or something like that. I'm not a Minecraft player, so I didn't quite understand. But he used the tool. I was like, oh, this is awesome. And I think the more people who do that, I don't really view that as competition.
Right.
Like it would be a very good problem if there were enough of those that it ended up being competition. Because more than anything, it's like the main comment you'll see on the top of any of the videos, and they're more in the long tail of YouTube. It's not like huge number of views, but it'll be like, oh, I see you're using 3Blue1Brown's tool, that kind of thing. So it ends up just being like a cross-promotional aspect.
Yeah,
it's the same.
That's true.
I view like other math channels the same way. I think it used to be the case that there was really just Numberphile as far as math channels go. And then maybe all of the ones where it's like teachers uploading their lectures, which is a whole other category of things. And then in more recent years, like around the same exact time I started, there's this other channel, Mathologer, who I love a lot. It's this like German guy who is a professor in Australia and just delights in math, and you get to just see how much he does. And I'm sure there's huge crossover in our audiences. PBS also started this channel called Infinite Series, and I think it would be tempting to view upcroppings like that in your niche as competition and saying, oh God, no, like the viewers of those are people who could be watching my videos instead. But more realistically, the portion of the YouTube pie that is people watching educational videos, and even more specifically, like your own niche within that, is so small that I think we're still within the range that anyone watching like a Mathologer or an Infinite Series or a Numberphile, that's probably strictly better for me because that means I'm more likely to show up in their suggested feed. Mm-hmm. In the same way that like if other people are watching engineering channels that are not yours, that's probably net positive for like people's exposure to you, unless you're getting to some kind of saturation point, right? Like, I don't know.
Like there's so many videos that they're like people can't physically watch them all.
Yeah,
the education genre in general is just so far from a saturation point.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of cool to see it growing, and a good sign of growth is how specifically focused individual creators are, right? Instead of it being a channel about like science broadly, it's like more, I don't know, let's just say like slightly emphasis on airplane style engineering. That kind of thing I love to see that. And I'm kind of curious to see in 10 years, what does that landscape look like? Is it hyper-specific creators? Is it... I actually don't know. I don't know if there will be more of a winner-takes-all dynamic, but...
Yeah, I think it's almost a necessity now to be a bit more niche, because getting noticed in the first place, you kind of have to like focus on something that you are really good at, and like you can broaden out later on. But I think starting off, there's value in attacking a niche and kind of dominating that particular part.
Yeah, that's a good point. I feel like I did exactly that, and I had to get a niche at first, just like you did, Brian. And now I feel released that I can do other topics. That's a good point.
It's kind of perverse, right? Because there are probably videos that you could make right now that would be incredibly popular, but if you had put them as the first video on your channel, would have elicited crickets.
Oh, yeah. And I also feel like a bit of that is because you build up a credibility where someone can see, or like someone will see a real engineering video, for example, and because previous real engineering videos were good, they're confident that this video will be good, even if the title is like, you know, how to bind a book. Or something. I don't know. That might be a good example.
Look out for that next month. How to bind a book with the classic like blue background, white outlined book.
And then I feel like as you start out, you have to rely a little bit more on clickbait and a little bit more on topics that you know Reddit's gonna love.
That's actually, I'd be curious to hear both of your takes on clickbaitiness and whether, like, if you're considering, you know, title or thumbnail for a video, to what extent do you just flop over backwards and say, well, I'm going to make this as clickbaity as possible, get as many people on it as long as the content itself is good, versus trying to keep an element of class about your entire brand?
Well, I think this has been told before on the podcast, but the brief version is I flew like 3,500 miles and spent thousands of dollars in order to go to a town to film a video just so I could call it the northernmost town in the U.S. I could have told the exact same story in kind of any small Alaskan town, probably, but I specifically went to this one, and I even dragged along Joseph from Real Life Lore and JT from Second Thoughts in order to have that title. But I think it was an interesting video. And so and if I had titled it Barrow, Alaska, or All About Barrow, Alaska, it would have gotten like 50,000 views. And it's actually now one of my more popular videos. So I think that there are times where the clickbait, clickbait is a little bit it's pejorative. It's pejorative.
I like the word like click worthy, which I'm not going to claim I invented, but I think I invented it. But in the end of the day, your video is going to be on a page with like 15, 16 other video. How many are on the subscription feed at once? Like,
I don't know.
Depends how far you zoom out. But you're going to be competing against other people, and you have to at least try to get people to notice yours first. And there's a very thin line there between like just being clickbaity, like your title is just inaccurate. I think I went over the line by a decent margin with my Apple video. I call it like the rise of Samsung, Apple's secret supplier. I think when I heard that title, I was like, oh, that's a good title. And then people started like complaining in the comments that like it was a bit clickbaity. And I was like, it is. It went, I think that particular one went over the bar, but you're trying to create a good title that's both accurate and will get people curious. Like if I titled that like OLED screens versus LCD screens, like no one would click on that. I don't even think my own subscribers would. Maybe a quarter of them might, but
I wouldn't.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, it's kind of interesting. Like a contrast to this in the broader space. I think if you look at Vsauce's videos, a lot of them it'll have just it is the bare bones.
Oh yeah, it's like the anti-clickbait.
Yeah, it is the anti-clickbait. So, and it does so in such a way that if you're looking at it in a broader feed, it stands out for how unobtrusive it is, right? I'm remembering one where it's called like the Brachistochrone, and the thumbnail is literally just a black background and a single slight curve on it. And it's as if it's a shy video, right? It's as if it doesn't really want to bother any of those around it. It's very British. It's like, oh, excuse me, just it's what I am. And like no one knows what the word Brachistochrone means because it's barely even a word. And maybe that elicits a bit of curiosity, but certainly it's not like, like the fastest way to the bottom and like red arrow pointing to the bottom of the curve or something to that effect. And part of that is because he has, built up enough of a brand and an audience that trusts that, I see a video here, I know it's going to be good.
Well,
but a flip side,
can I?
Oh, go on, yeah.
Can I bring attention to how clickbaity Vsauce was when he started out?
Oh yeah.
That's maybe a very good point. Yeah, that like you don't grow to that point. But
it's all anime boobs everywhere. It's like the most clickbaity shit you've ever seen.
Yeah,
Wait,
so maybe,
let me read one.
That might cut to the thought of there are things that you can do once you have an audience that you could never do before you do.
Yeah. I think to the point that you were saying, I think when you grow an audience that trust you and know the video you're going to make is good, and you already have that audience, you don't have to worry about it as much. But when you're growing and you're fighting to get people to buy into your brand almost, it's kind of a necessity to be a bit more like draw people towards that.
But it is a non-zero cost. Like I think it's worth acknowledging that. Maybe you say, well, this will get more views, but it still is a cost to that brand. And I guess for lack of a better word, I'm going to say class, like how classy people think your videos are, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe it's worth it because it exposes it to more people and you give it a chance for them to actually see the underlying content, which is where you hope to reach them in that way. But the only point with Vsauce I was going to make is even though you might view it like because he has that brand, he can pull off like the subtle thumbnail. I think the flip side is because he's the kind of person who's willing to have the subtle thumbnail, that's what maintains the brand, right? There's a reflexivity to it.
Mm-hmm. I think his titles and the ambiguity he has, it also helps him because it allows him to do that whole wild segues into things that only vaguely have to do with the topic because there really isn't a topic.
Yeah.
It's kind of just like, here's 20 minutes of very interesting stuff, loosely based around, who owns the moon, for example. That's one of his. So it actually is his anti-clickbait is a bit on brand with the kind of videos he makes without even talking about the thumbnail or title.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it's a really interesting case study. I'm just scrolling through the kind of evolution of Vsauce, and it's pretty much illustrating that point perfectly on how a channel can kind of build a brand for itself. Like there's one there, one of his more recent ones, like Super Tasks, and it's just a picture of a box, like a multicolored box, and it's got 6.3 million views. But then you go back to the start, and there's 5 games that will get you laid.
Oh yeah, here's like, bra gun, and yeah. Well, I don't want. If there was a way, I would fact check this, but I believe when Michael worked at YouTube, he actually worked in kind of the analytical side of it. So he probably knows what he's doing with these, because I think a lot of his job was figuring out how this stuff worked. In terms of what makes a video popular. So maybe we should all do this.
I mean, I think there's something to be said for if the goal of having like something snazzy and clickbaity is to stand out, and you're saying, you're in this competitive market where on a screen of 15 different videos, yours has to stand out. If you imagine a world where every single one of them has like the red arrow, red circle, or the person who's outlined in like a highlighted yellow or whatever it might be that's supposed to make it pop. If you have a page of like 15 of those and then one that's, let's say it was just like this incredibly subtle picture of like an airplane emoji that's like a fifth of the height of the screen just in the middle and like nothing but black elsewhere, that makes it stand out. Given the context. In a different context, it would be unobtrusive, but in a context of noise, it's like this very welcomed bit of silence that maybe even draws your eye. So I don't know, maybe there's something particularly calculated about how he does these things.
Well, I think part part of it, like even like your thumbnails, there's a very distinctive style. Like you have a set font, it seems. You have a color scheme. You have your little pie character and all that. Like your thumbnails stick out, and I think the other important part of this is that your particular videos, the people who are already fans of your videos can find them straight away. Like when they look at it, be like, oh, that's like another 3Blue1Brown video. And that's the other end of it.
I mean, for me, that's the like primary factor that I try to focus on, is have something that's characteristic. And then second to that is maybe making it stand out in some way. But you can probably tell I don't really do that much to effectively make it stand out per se. But I do think more important than anything is making it very clear, like, who you are. And a lot of people will do that with an even simpler, like having that little sidebar on the left that has their logo or something to that effect. But I think the ultimate goal, and I think this probably goes for any channel, you probably want it to be the case that when anyone sees like, oh, there's a new Real Engineering video, that they don't even think and they just want to click and view it, right? That there's not this moment of decision of, is this really the kind of thing that I'm interested in? Do I care about like Apple and Samsung? It's like, whatever this is about, it's going to be thoughtfully written and like have some beautiful visuals to really aid that narrative. So the ultimate goal is to get people not to think about it. And if that's the case, if you reach that, I think just make sure it's crystal clear when you have a new video, for whatever that ends up meaning.
Yeah, for sure. Like you have to kind of build, like, you'd have to build your own representation. And like you do really well on that. Like people obviously know when you release a video, the quality of their, like I've said it to you before that I think your channel is one of the most valuable on YouTube in terms of like what it's giving back to the world. Like if there was one you did a series on just calculus and stuff, and I wasn't great at maths in school. And that sort of stuff would have helped me understand it way better because I'm like a visual learner. And it's like so cool. I love that series.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, I definitely will invest more heavily in series like that moving forward.
I'm curious to hear from you. Who do you think, or who do you get a sense is kind of like your core audience? Is it people who already kind of really know a lot about math and just like to hear more about it, or people who are trying to learn, or what do you kind of know about your audience?
So always hard to speculate. I can say a couple things. I think there's two different types of videos I'll do. Those that sit in a series, like the one that Brian just referenced. And for those, you do see more students, like maybe college age, let's say. And then in general, if you look at the demographics, the biggest spike is the like 24 to 30 range. So not student anymore. And I think of a lot of those as just yuppies, probably working in technology, who are like kind of interested in tech and math and like to think of themselves as a lifelong learner. So realistically, if I think of like the social function that it's serving, for most people, rather than sparking an interest in math, it's like they already have the interest in math. So I'm just fanning those flames. And I see a real social function to that, to like reminding people, hey, yeah, you do like this topic. Like it's not dry, like keep up with it. One of the hopes that I have in putting out, let's say, a series on calculus, like if you're into math, you're like, I learned calculus. I learned that already. And you see in that series, there's sort of a strong drop off between the start and the end for how many people are viewing it. But I don't necessarily view that as like, therefore it wasn't even worth it to, like the marginal benefit of that last video wasn't high enough. I should have just done some standalone video that would have reached more people. Because instead, if there's any chance that there's going to be to actually spark an interest in math from someone, it's going to be because they're in school and they need to learn it. There's an external pressure on them, like, hey, you've got this test coming up, or like, hey, you've got this course you're going to take next year that like people have said is scary. And doing something that helps, I don't think they teach people, but helps prime the intuitions so that when they are learning or when they are pushed up against walls, they have certain images in their mind that they can call upon to help clarify it. So, and part of that, one thing I'm contemplating is whether it's worth basically having 2 channels, sort of splitting one that is devoted to all of the future series like that in the long run, I just want to be a library, like Essence of Calculus, Essence of Linear Algebra, and then fill in whatever other math topic you want that has like dozens of series in the long run, let's hope. And then another one that is for, hey, you're probably already interested in math and you just like to see cool things that you haven't heard of before, or interesting perspectives on something you heard of before that will make it shine in a novel light. Make that the main channel, so that it's like I said, you don't want people thinking, do I want to click on this? Whereas I think if it's chapter 9 of a calculus series, someone who's already into math, they're like, yeah, probably don't need to click on that because I already feel comfortable with this stuff. So I'm kind of debating whether or not that's worth doing, and I'm leaning towards doing it, but I'll see.
Showmakers is made possible by Eero. If you've ever set up a Wi-Fi network, you know it's normally a mess. It's a seemingly endless process which usually finishes with dead spots and Wi-Fi much slower than your internet speed. But there is a solution. Eero makes it almost effortless to set up a well-functioning Wi-Fi network. It takes less than 10 minutes to set up the main Eero device. Then, depending on the size of your home, you can add additional Eero beacons that just plug into an outlet and extend your network. Once your network is set up, Eero intelligently adapts to the shape and environment of your home to optimize your network, so it works great everywhere. You can get great Wi-Fi tomorrow with free overnight shipping by heading over to eero.com and using the promo code Showmakers at checkout. That's eero.com and the promo code Showmakers for free overnight shipping on your Eero Wi-Fi system. Yeah, there definitely is at the same time, it's myself and Sam and I had a discussion about this relatively recently. I think of like when you start creating new channels, every time you start a new one, you're kind of decreasing your ability to get people to switch over to that new channel as well. So like when you create, he did it perfectly with Half Is Interesting. Mm-hmm. Like I think you got like 100,000 subs in like less than a week or something.
Yeah, it kind of launched with I think about 125,000.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's insane. Like you've got another silver play button like straight away.
Well, not yet, but that's a story for another day.
But you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you like, I created like Real Engineering 2, and I still haven't put a video up there because just the idea for the channel just fell through, because I wanted to do that thing with like putting the more kind of technical, boring, like kind of forgetting the entertainment part of the video and just going straight on like kind of academic. And I needed a college to team up with me to do that, and I just haven't been able to get one to actually give me the resources. But I thought,
if I were you, I don't mean to be the guy that like gives unsolicited advice, but if you do end up saying, okay, I do want to put some of the more technical, like this is for the people who really want to learn, on a second channel, I would say, don't worry about production quality as much. Like focus just on the quickest way to put the thing out there. Because I think once you have people who actually want to learn the thing, they'll be incredibly tolerant of like lower production quality, things that take less time. Like the writing should still be there. That's the core part.
Yeah, but that's the hardest part. Like I wasn't planning on having it as well produced as the main channel. It was probably going to be closer to the slideshow than a video. But like the writing is the part I need help with, because I'm able to do surface level kind of research really quickly and kind of get a general understanding of something. But to teach something to a college class kind of level, I don't have the time or resources to do that. So I was hoping to get a college that has all that information already there to help me like write the scripts and everything, and just give me the information and I'll package it into like a nice video.
You could take a total pivot and do the Brady Heron thing of just interviewing people who are experts in the field to effectively put the writing off onto someone who already knows the thing.
Yeah. There's a lot of things I'd love to do, but
yeah,
back to the original point of, I'm afraid that has kind of like taken away from my ability, the trust my audience have in me when I say I've started a new channel.
You didn't really plug it that much.
No, I kind of put it at the end of one of my less popular videos, because it's one of those videos where I titled it accurately. It's like Material Properties 101. It was literally just explaining some of the words I use in my videos, because people mix up strength and elasticity and all this all the time. Like, they don't use it accurately, and if you don't understand what they mean in an engineering context, you lose a lot of the meaning of what I'm talking about. And I kind of plugged it at the end of the video. That I'd be uploading videos like that in future on the second channel, because I didn't want people to be wondering whether they want to watch this next video because it's going to be boring or something.
Oh, I don't think you've lost any trust on that front. I think the way that you'd lose trust is if you had disappointing videos on the channel. But I think people kind of understand. It's like, yeah, no, these things take time. And me, I think I was loosely aware that you had like a Real Engineering 2. And I was like, yeah, a lot of YouTube folk, they have their channel name with the number 2 as maybe I'll put some extra stuff on there, maybe not. It's not something where, oh, Brian, he made this promise to upload, and boy, a man who lets me down on promises, I tell you what, I'm not watching anything he plugs anymore. Like, fool me once, man, fool me once.
I agree. I think it's completely different since it has that 2 in the name. Whereas when I did it, it was kind of a, oh, here's a big new thing I'm doing. You have to go watch, or you're dead to me. Whereas creating a second channel is a little less big. You're fine. Do your second channel.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm more, yeah, I'm yeah, sorry.
I think, yeah. I mean, there's competing factors, because on the one hand, it's like you want to leverage whatever audience base you already have as much as you can. So the thought of putting quality content onto a second place that doesn't have that, it's kind of the scary thing where, but like it would reach so many more people if I just doubled down on the main channel. But I think long run, if it comes to be the case that there's a slight divide in why people are watching it in the first place, rather than having kind of a unified answer that people can give to like, oh, why are you watching this channel? That ends up, I would guess, but I think some people would disagree. I think that ends up being damaging in the long run.
I think it would be fine either way. For your type of content, I would probably say put it on your normal channel. It's like people are watching it because I think particularly with your channel, people are watching it because of you. They don't really care so much about what you put out there. Like your videos are 20-minute long, like really in-depth things. I think people just watch it because they enjoy the way you explain things.
I'm asking for a lot of investment as it is. I guess that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll see.
It's amazing how much we work. We kind of talk through big decisions on this podcast. So when I was, there are many conversations we had on this podcast that affected my second channel, and now we're telling Brian to do one, and you. So,
well, any regrets? Any times you were like, boy, Brian gave me this advice and it turned out to be absolute shit. I should never seek that out again.
Every day. You don't see half the shit I tell him. Send him DMs on Twitter all the time.
I know, he's quite cruel.
I'm trying to look through your channel now and find like really interesting case examples of.
Oh, you're not gonna find anything interesting there. You're gonna have to scroll to a different channel
like,
if you want something interesting.
Just give up. No, because I felt like we haven't talked about your content all that much yet, and essentially it's the unique thing about your channel is that there really isn't any other channel explaining math the way you do. I mean, Numberphile does a great job as well. I think Numberphile was one of the first times I got really interested in like hardcore math and like started to understand why mathematicians got so excited about it. It's like, for me, I try to explain engineering in a way that I get excited about it, and that's the main selling point for any channel like this. People aren't going to be interested if you're not excited.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing Numberphile adds is just putting this human face to, well, mathematicians, right? I think a lot of people, if you were to ask them, like, is mathematician, is that a thing? Is this an occupation or a role that people have? They'd say, no, that's just a word you put to people who like math. Like, no one does that. No one likes that. But actually giving a little bit of humanity behind that, and I think he's very smart to have a whole bunch of playlists just based on the individual that he's interviewing, because it's way fun to just binge based on an individual rather than on a topic. I think that illustrates sort of the function that it's serving. Because if the natural thing to do is to have playlists in terms of topics, that would be an indication that when people watch Numberphile, it's because of the thing that they want to learn. But if it's by the people, it's because they're watching because they like those people. And the fact that there is math behind it and a little bit of, I don't know, titillation of those little logical portions of your brain that give you that pleasing thought of two unexpected things coming together. Like, that's all nice, but it's almost secondary to the main goal. And in my case, I just think there's a lot of things where it's very hard to understand, not in a visual way. And some people will say, well, maybe you're just a visual learner, and other people are more like auditory learners or like tactile learners. But I don't really believe in that divide. I think that there's some things that the objectively best way to learn it is just to see the thing happening in front of you rather than trying to awkwardly describe it in terms of symbols or words or like the special set theory notation that ends up making a lot of this stuff look much more abstruse than it needs to be. And a lot of that, I think, is what I'm trying to do, where I think one of the videos I put out there that I think maybe is one that reached people more deeply. It's about this thing called the Riemann zeta function that the reason that it'll be in people's minds, it's one of these things called the Millennium Prize problem, where the Clay Math Institute in 2000, they said, here are 7 problems in math that we find to be very important for the field, so important that anyone who solves them will give them $1 million. And that gives a certain sexiness to it, right? Because it's like, these $1 million problems. And between two...
It's like a treasure
hunt.
It
is, right? It is. Only one of them has been solved. And that's an interesting story because he turned down the $1 million. He also turned down the Fields Medal, which is kind of like the Nobel Prize of Math, except it's given once every 4 years instead of once every year. And that's a whole interesting story that I'm like happy to go into. But so there's 6 remaining that like haven't been solved. And arguably one of the most famous within them, probably because of its age in comparison to the others, is this thing called the Riemann hypothesis. And if you just go to the Wikipedia page and you try to like read about what this thing is, it is, especially if you don't have a background in math, it is just impossible to understand what the thing is asking. Because it starts off, it's like, here's a formula for this function. And you read through and you're like, okay, I kind of get it. We're like adding up these infinitely many things. And then it's like, notice how we're looking for like where this function equals 0. And it describes these like trivial zeros at negative even integers. And once you parse what all of that means, what it's saying is if you take 1 plus 4 plus 9 plus 16 plus 25 and you add up all of the positive square numbers, you get 0. You're like, what the fuck? Like, no, that's wrong. So if you're calling that a trivial 0, and we're looking for non-trivial zeros, what are you talking about? This is not math anymore. You're just making stuff up. But the actual thing going on here relies on this pretty heavy like topic called analytic continuation, which if you want to get a feel for it, like you've got to go through a meaningful number of undergraduate like college math topics and like get your head around them a lot. And I think a lot of times it would be viewed as this as the kind of thing that you can't put out to the public. Like you can loosely tell people what it is, but obviously you can't have like a little public description of that. But I think it's only because if you're trying to describe it with language versus just showing what the thing is, it ends up being more difficult than it has to be. And it takes like 20 minutes. It's not a short video. But I actually think like if someone groks what's going on in that, I almost feel like they have a better conception of what this word is supposed to mean than if they go through a complex analysis course in college. They obviously get a lot more from the college course, but there's an element of, if you only understand in terms of the formal definitions and like the symbols, there's something a little bit missing. So I just wanted to show what this thing actually is. And I think that like if people like the content, or if they feel like it stands out from like other channels in some way, it is, insofar as I maybe succeed at that, I don't know if I do, just trying to take a thing that would be intractable to describe in a short amount of time without the visuals, and then like take some care to illustrate just the core of the specific thing we're talking about without worrying about all of the surrounding baggage. And it's honestly one of those things where every time I make a video, I'm like, boy, this took me forever to understand. And I wish someone had described it to me like this, right? It's it's almost like you're making it for yourself rather than for others. You're like, if I had a time machine and I could just go back and like throw something in front of my former self to save a lot of time, this is what I might strive to do.
That's an interesting way of putting it.
And I'm sure this goes for you guys as well. Like when you put something together, part of it is because you came to some satisfying understanding of a phenomenon in the world, and the same way that it sort of pleased you or tied some loose ends in your mind. On the one hand, you want to share that, but on the other hand, it's kind of another way to just reach closure with the topic purely for yourself, independent of whether the video is published, just to have the nice, succinct description in existence.
Yeah, like, I mean, half the time, how do you choose a video when, like, what's going to be your next video? Like, how do you choose that?
Boy, it's funny because people ask this and I feel like I should have a good answer. I have a long running list of whenever there's something that I'm like, this might be good, and throw it on the list. So the question is like how to prioritize things. And I try to, if it's something that I feel like there's not other descriptions of out there, right? Like, if it feels like it'll be additive into the world, that gives it a bit of credit and helps it bubble up towards the top of the list. Well, the ones I love is if there's a particularly hard thing and just by viewing it from a different perspective, it becomes easy. Like that has a very specific flavor of satisfaction, and those will often make it bubble right to the top. But that's not always how I recently did some on neural networks, and it's not that those have those vibes. It's just one of those things where it's like, I think it would be fun to try to put out a nice description of what a neural network is. Not because like, there's a really elegant proof underlying this, but instead just, this is a thing that I'd like to take a stab at explaining. And obviously a bit of that is because, I don't know, maybe it's kind of riding a certain hype train. Deep learning is a very popular thing. Similar I put out a video on like how cryptocurrencies work, and Bitcoin in particular. And like obviously part of the motivation there, it's like, boy, these cryptocurrencies seem really popular right now. Maybe some people would like to see how they actually work. It's almost my own way of investing in them, or at least investing in the attention going towards them. So that maybe is a little bit like, there's not like a strong, noble reason behind how those get prioritized.
Yeah, well, you have to take advantage of like the zeitgeist at that moment. Like if there's a lot of stuff going, like a lot of people are talking about that video, it's automatically going to show up on like the trend, or not the trending, like suggested videos and stuff.
It is a balance though, because I mean, I like to strive for evergreen content that 5-10 years from now would still be relevant. And I think that'll be the case for like the cryptocurrency one, because those aren't going away, and it's focused not on like, what is Bitcoin's price now, and like how can you anticipate, like what is the appropriate investment strategy, if like that would be the very clickbaity kind of thing. But instead it's just trying to focus on what is the thing worth explaining here that will also be worth explaining 5 years from now. I like to think that's true for the neural net ones as well. But then again, that might just be, like I said at the start, we tend to rationalize the reasons that we do things in hindsight, when in prospect, it might just actually be like, this is the thing people are talking about. Let me just hop on that wave.
Like, how do you see many like videos getting popular after like months after you've uploaded? Like, because that evergreen content is something that's really great within the science videos. Because I say Logan Paul uploaded a video like 2 years ago, hardly anyone's going to watch it 2 years ago, whereas I assume videos that you created 2 years ago are still getting decent views.
Yeah, I don't think nothing comes to mind right now where I put it out and then like a year later it's like, there's a huge spike in this. But I do think there's probably I should actually compare with other channels to see like the ratio of like views received per day a year after it's published versus a month after it's published, and see if that ratio is any different for my channel than for others. I don't know if it actually would be. I will say,
I'd be very curious to see that.
I will say with the linear algebra series, that one probably has a thicker tail, because and you'll see that sway up and down a little bit with the school year. So that clearly, that's clearly because it is a little bit more targeted towards students. So yeah, that would be one, I guess. It's not as if there was some singular event out there where suddenly everyone was searching for linear algebra, but instead it's like as many people need it now as they did a year ago, and hopefully as many need it 5 years from now. And if someone puts out a better series, fantastic, like more knowledge to the world. But I like to think that it'll still serve someplace.
Well, I just did a quick little test of your SEO, and I mean, this is the stuff where your videos are going to do really well long term. I just searched algebra, and your video like has 3 of the top 5 spots.
There we go.
Like that's insane.
Then again, are you searching on like your own YouTube that has recognized that you have seen this channel before? Like if you do it on incognito.
I don't think that affects search results. Because I think that affects.
Well, it's different for me.
Yeah.
Really?
I think that affects.
I'm going into
for sure
incognito and see from there.
Incognito, algebra, a lot of other things.
Oh no, yeah, you don't show up in the top 5.
But if you search linear algebra,
it does. You do. Oh no, that's Khan Academy. Oh no,
Khan Academy. No, I still love them. I still have close ties with them.
There's a lot of algebra videos.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, because we talk about YouTube education, but there's a whole other component of what that means in different people's eyes. Like at VidCon, right? I think there was sort of a little a de facto clique and group of people within the space that like the 3 of us might have been spending time with. But I also spent a little bit of time in this totally different corner of YouTube education, which is teachers who upload their content, right? And obviously production quality is like the 4th concern on their list. And it's just like how much are they engaging their students and things like that. And there's a whole inspiring aspect to what that is, or a pessimistic one if you're not too keen on people actually learning from videos. But it's worth pointing out how, I guess just how, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like the space is on the one hand very small, but the portion that we're in is an even smaller part of that space, right? You know what I mean?
Well, I had this conversation with my brother, who's a school teacher in America, and there's a huge industry in America for, like, if a kid fails during the year and they have to take, like, remedial classes or do something during the summer, a lot of it is done through video. They give them a program, and the kid watches these videos, and usually they're pretty poorly produced, and then they have to do, like, some sort of exam at the end to show that they've learned something from it. But it's a huge industry that isn't very well done. Like, a lot of it is kind of bureaucratic and political on who gets to create those videos and stuff. And a lot of the time it doesn't help the kids. Like, I think there is potential for videos like yours to be introduced into a system like that.
What? Sorry if this is a sidetrack, but do you know the specific name of the software that his school ended up using?
I don't know the exact name.
Is it Alex?
I've no idea. Like, he didn't mention it.
Okay.
We were talking about it because he wants to develop his own version of it.
Interesting.
But yeah, like it seems like it's inevitable that videos like yours are going to get introduced to systems like that, because the production, like, you're making a name for yourself without having a leg up from like government bodies, like just throwing it in and like forcing kids to watch it. Like, they come to you because you do it best, and like, the fact that it's not currently being used there seems a bit odd.
I mean, that's a very nice thing to say. And I'm saying the following not just out of a false sense of modesty, but like a legitimate belief. The kind of content that's needed when you're in school and you're preparing for a test or you're trying to get through homework is going to be much more focused on worked examples. And it should be given to you in a context where immediately after or before watching the video, you're doing concrete practice. And the type of things that I do, they're not worked examples. And if I was seeing like a student, whether they're successful or struggling, I would say the role that these videos should have is not going to be helping you with that homework or preparing you for that test per se. The best place I could see it is before you take the course, like, take a look through these. My hope is that they like prime your intuitions so that when you are exposed to new topics, rather than it just being like, oh, this is the definition of a derivative. Instead, you have like an image of your mind of what that's supposed to represent and how if you tweak one thing, what the resulting tweak should be, and something that's much more visceral, and that maybe that gives you a stronger bond to the problems that you're working on. And when you are watching like the Khan Academy work example, it gives that a little bit more color to what's going on there. But I would never claim, well, the sources that they're using are strictly inferior and they should plug my videos in instead. They're just serving a totally different function. And I've thought about going down that route, right? Having a little bit more of a branch of 3Blue1Brown that is like, okay, let's do the worked examples. Let's produce some exercises. Let's make this more than just videos watched kind of for entertainment. Like, let's be honest. And I don't know. I think one example, I just would never even think of them as being a replacement for what Khan Academy is. And I think they could like live side by side in harmony forever, neither one of them competing with the other. So there's very different needs being addressed. And even if you can look at some of the content that might be inside these systems that are heavily marketed towards school districts without the districts looking at the quality of the content itself. And, it's very easy to get skeptical then and say, well, this is sort of like shabbily put together. It sometimes, just as long as there's like questions and as long as it enables the student to go at their own pace rather than being shoved through at the same rate as all of their peers, that's all you really need. You don't need like a fancier, perfect explanation on top of that. Just give a student the breathing room to sit back and contemplate it in their own time. And it almost doesn't matter what the explanation put in front of them is, as long as it's halfway decent.
I don't think that's true at all. I think you're not recognizing the value of your own content, because if I was given a tool like that when I was struggling in school, I think I would have been a bit resentful of having to be sat in front of this computer because the teacher didn't want to take the time to teach me because I was struggling. But if I was given content that spoke to me in a way that made me passionate about the subject and got me excited about learning it, that would have had such a deep impact on me earlier on, and realized that, okay, maybe I amn't bad at math, I'm just not being taught it in the way that it should be taught.
Well, where I might push back a little bit is there's a risk of giving people the illusion of understanding math. Like you put a video together and they say, that was very clear. And maybe it was. Maybe like they followed all of the steps. But unless it's the case that they have solved a problem that was a little beyond what they usually would be able to, and that required struggle and kind of a painful sense of chewing through glass in order to get there, I don't have a lot of faith that actual learning took place. And I think it's very easy for someone to watch something that feels like a good explanation, either from their own teacher or from like a video that was thoughtfully put together, and think, why don't other people explain it this way? Like if only everyone explained it this way, I would have gotten everything. And maybe that's true, but you're not done after watching that video. And I think the experience of learning isn't always going to be the one that feels the best. And sometimes people misattribute the times when they're actually learning, right? Sometimes they watch one video and think, that's when I was actually learning, and do something else that felt painful and say, no, that was just a waste of time. But the thing that felt like a waste of time that was a little more painful, that they don't want to acknowledge was where growth was happening, was the more important one. I guess all I'm saying is I don't necessarily trust the review that a student would give for the quality of a video
Yeah, of course. Like there needs to be a balance there. You need to be checking continually whether they are actually learning from it. Like I'm not suggesting just put a kid who's struggling to sit down and watch your channel. Like there needs to be a balance of hands-on stuff and like examinations and everything. But I don't know. And I'd say my experience with school probably differs from your experience with school, I'm guessing.
Well, tell me about it. Let's dig in. It's actually very interesting because, not to like plug my own podcast or anything, but on a podcast that I do with two people named Ben, one of the Bens, like his experience with math in school was very much a hard one. Like I think he mentions having taken calculus probably like 4 different times and failing it in all of them. But he knows the stuff very deeply now. He actually like contributed much of the early Khan Academy calculus content. Like, he knows the stuff deeply, but it's interesting to see how the school system didn't work for him, despite the fact that he's like one of the smartest people I know. So I'm always curious to hear what that ends up meaning or looking like. And that doesn't necessarily mean like, oh, the school system didn't work for you, like failing through, even if it was just doing okay, but having a sense of dissatisfaction. Tell me a little of your story there.
Well, I don't know how the American systems worked when you were growing up, but for me, kids that were struggling were generally pretty much shunned in my school. I went to a pretty academic school. We didn't do like woodwork or anything like that. It was all maths and languages and like science. I failed the entrance exam, which is technically illegal in Ireland. You're not supposed to refuse kids for failing entrance exams. Like, it's kind of a hush-hush thing of that they actually do refuse kids based on their results. But I got pretty much 0% in my maths entrance exam because I wasn't really taught it. Before that I went to a really country school where they were more concerned with sending us out to do PE and gardening and stuff than actually teaching us math for whatever reason. It was weird. So I went in and struggled for the first like 2-3 years with math and stuff, and my teachers kind of treated me as such that I was just stupid. And I didn't really get the extra help that I just needed. Like, teachers just assumed I was stupid. And then I kind of discovered physics and biology and chemistry. And then I realized, okay, I'm not stupid. I can actually learn this stuff if I try to. But just in Ireland in particular, I think things have improved now since I was in school. I think they're starting to bring in teachers for kids with dyslexia and things like that, and just kids that need a bit of emotional support and all that. But
that's interesting to hear, because my mom actually grew up in Ireland, and I think she had a very similar experience where as soon as they sort of see you as not a math person, even though that's not really a thing, as soon as there's like that label, she just felt completely thrown out into the back, and like zero consideration was given to like catching her up and like fostering a true understanding of the subject. Instead, it was just, maybe we'll have you focus on different things.
Yeah,
I mean, that was going to be notably before like you were in school, I'm sure, but still I wonder.
Oh, it was far worse. I mean, you go back 30-40 years in Ireland, and my mom was kicked out of school when she was like 14 for drawing a naked woman in art class. The art teacher told her to. This was like national news in Ireland.
That's insane.
She got literally, I think that the whole class got kicked out of school because it was a Catholic school.
I'm sure she got beaten by the nuns as well.
I think that was more my father's side. Like, she grew up in Dublin, my dad grew up in Limerick or Leitrim, which is really rural. But yeah, I think that took a while to stop being a thing in Ireland. Even I've been hit by teachers, but I kind of asked for it. Like, I was a cheeky little kid. I was a bit of an attention seeker and liked riling people up. I still like riling people up, as case in example with my last video making fun of the imperial system. But yeah, I think, like I said it to you earlier on, that I think if I found your videos that explain math to the way my brain works, words I find difficult. I don't know if I've never really been tested for it. I don't know if I'm dyslexic or what the hell, but my mind just doesn't work so well with words. Which is why, like, even for my own channel with Real Engineering, when I see something explained visually, I think I can explain it well because I have difficulty understanding it myself. So I have to put a lot of thought into like explaining it to myself before I can explain it to someone else.
Yeah, I mean, obviously what I'm saying has to be taken with a grain of salt, that clearly I have sort of invested my life towards creating content of this kind, and I really do hope that it helps people learn and is valuable. So it can only be with so much devil's advocacy that I put them off to the side of what a real learning experience would be. But I mean, on the side of like visuals, I think just the portion of our brain that goes towards visual processing is so large that it's not just some people just like words less, some people like visuals more. This is why I feel like it might just be, for certain topics, objectively the case that a visual description well put together conveys more information, right? You're just getting more bits from one person's mind into another person's mind because because of the channel capacity of a visual medium versus an auditory one, and also because of just the size of like the visual cortex compared to, I don't know, the Wernicke's area or whatever else. I don't know enough about neuroscience to actually speak with any authority on it, but from a vague like outsider looking in kind of perspective, it just feels like one of these carries a lot more weight than the other. And I think the reason that more things aren't described with like visuals and animations is because it takes forever, right? Like you're writing a textbook and you're thinking, oh, do I put together the perfect diagram here? That takes time. And unless there's an incentive to put in that time, it's not going to happen. And I felt this. I felt this because I wrote a lot of like sort of written material when I was at Khan Academy. And unless you had a sense of either an external forcing function or an internal sense of pride to put the appropriate diagram in there, it's just not going to happen because it's just so much quicker to write a description of what the thing would be and say, try to picture it in your head, or not even say that, but in between the lines, that's what you're saying. So
like one of the reasons there's more and more of our channels showing up too is because the barrier to entry to animating has dropped dramatically too. Well, other than you wrote your own software because you're a lunatic.
I didn't feel that low barrier. No. Even that's kind of a good example, I guess, because what it takes to code things, like to produce something nice programmatically these days, is going to be very different than, I don't know, let's say like 15 years ago, just because of how much is open sourced and just how many libraries there are, and the existence of things like Stack Overflow, where if you don't know something, you can get to know it pretty immediately. Like a lot of that, I don't know, for all of the same reasons that the software industry as a whole is just bulldozing forward at an accelerating pace. I get a little sense of why that's true, because it's not just standing on the shoulders of giants, right? It's like standing on the shoulders of giants who are growing at an exponential rate.
Yeah.
I have one more question. What is the story behind 3Blue1Brown as a name and the logo, which for those listening at home is like 3/4 blue and 1/4 brown?
Yeah.
This was the exact question I was about to ask.
Oh, well, there we go.
I will begin by saying I fully acknowledge this is mildly weird. However, I'm happy with it. The logo is a loose depiction of my right eye, which is got this thing called heterochromia, where 3/4 of it is blue and 1/4 of it is brown. So it was kind of a way of putting a genetic signature on my work in the same way that other people have their name on their work, either for the channel or whatever it might be. I'm like, oh, this is sort of a nice way to put a little bit of me into it. And then I couldn't think of a good name for the channel, but I definitely knew I kind of wanted it to be a little bit weird and distinctive, because a lot of people think that names, like if they hear a name at first and they're like, oh, that sounds weird, they think that means it's a bad name. But usually after you hear it enough times, then you are able to sort of build your own brand into it. So I just had a name that was based on the logo, that it was I wanted it to be distinct in style from other types of names out there. And a disadvantage, of course, if you're describing it to someone on the street, you're like, oh, run this YouTube channel. What's it called? 3Blue1Brown. There's like, you have to, 3 with like a numeral, not like spelled out, and there's no spaces. And it's like an awkward thing to communicate out loud. But of course, most things are done through text, so that doesn't really matter. An advantage that I totally didn't anticipate, but I'm like pleased with. Anything that's alphabetically organized, numerals go right to the top of it. So if it's like someone's subscription feed or whatever else is like alphabetized in any way, by default, turns out having a number at the start of your name rather than a letter like a normal person gives this perverse advantage. But yeah, I mean, also like having my eye, it's because it is a very visual thing, right? It's like, this is how I see math, right? And because we're going to focus on seeing things, it is a little bit apropos to have an eye on it, even if that's a risk there. You don't want something that ends up looking creepy, and it's just like the logo is this eye of Sauron staring you down. But hopefully.
I remember when I first met you, who was it? It was Henry. Was I with Henry before I met you?
Well, the first time we met in person was at VidCon, and then not in person was on that call with Henry.
But you were with you were hanging out with Destin and Brady. weren't you? And then Henry brought me down to meet you.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure if I was with you and Henry before, and then we went to meet Destin and Brady. But I remember I was like, oh my God, your eye is actually...
There was another funny moment there where, like, just in a moment of, like, silence, I think maybe we were, like, eating or something like that, Destin just has a sense like, oh, I just saw why you named your channel what you did. Right?
The very Destin response to like, just childish excitement.
Yeah.
I saw you showed up on the front page of, or were you? You showed up somewhere on Reddit. Yeah, I just opened a link. Is like someone put a picture of you up on. I think it was mildly interesting or something. I was like, I know that person.
Oh, that was so funny. So there's not really a lot of pictures. I don't like hide my picture or anything like that. I'm just not much of a selfie person. But my friend Cam from Khan Academy gives me this call. He's like, Grant, right now at the top of mildly interesting is this picture of like an eye that's half blue and half brown. And I think if we like posted a picture of your eye up there right now, we could kind of, ride that wave a little bit. Like, all right, Cam, if you want to do that. And I was like in a cafe or something at that time. So it's like, all right, just like send me a picture of yourself. So then I just like felt really, I'm like in this cafe, like trying to take a selfie in some way. And I'm like, not really a selfie person. And then I like sort of step outside into the dark and it doesn't work. I'm like, maybe if I have the flash, does this kind of go? I'm like, all right, Cam, I'll send you a whole bunch and like, we'll see what works with here. But he got pleasingly excited about it. That was, I don't know. That was just sort of a silly little thing. But I don't think it reached the hopes and ambitions that he had of like rising to the top of mildly interesting and riding the wave of the heterochromia interest of that day.
Anywho.
Well, gentlemen, do you have a standard closer?
No, we just do
it usually ends really awkwardly.
No, you gotta have a sign off. It's never too late,
Go away now.
Go make those shows or something like that.
Go do YouTube.
I mean, yeah, we all. No, this is how you should end. Just at the end, when there's that natural moment of silence, be like, "Well, we all got shit to do," and then just hard cut there.
Yeah, I have an Uber Eats order arriving in 2 minutes, so we need to wrap this up. That's our ending.
Okay, there we go. Sam's got to eat. I need to go to sleep.
I got to eat. Brian's got to sleep. It's 7 p.m. and Brian's...
We got shit to do.
Brian's sleeping.
We got shit to do. We got to go. Bye. You need to tone that down on the audio. I said that too loud.
Okay, bye. Thanks for listening. Thanks for coming, Grant. Thanks for coming, Brian.
Absolutely.
Goodbye.